Okay, in the second part, I just want to talk about a few kinds of repetition that poets use frequently and that become really handy to talk about in poems. So first is the repetition of sounds, and the most basic way to divide this up is between consonant sounds and vowel sounds, and the way many of you have probably learned is between alliteration as the repetition of consonant sounds, like lovely lads and ladies, or assonance as the repetition of vowel sounds. You can divide that up a little bit more and say that alliteration is the repetition of consonants at the beginning of words, like lovely lads and ladies. But consonants is the repetition of consonant sounds anywhere in a word. And that distinction is handy sometimes to make as well. So this is something, again, that we can look at through Dickinson's poem, and particularly in its last stanza. So here it is again. And let's look at that last stanza. With blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz, between the light and me, and then the windows failed, and then I could not see to see. So you have alliteration here in the blue and buzz and between in those first two lines. If you want to add consonants, you have the B in stumbling as well. So blue and stumbling and buzz in between. And even the BL in blue becomes the BL in stumbling in that bit of consonants. Assonance comes up in a couple of ways. There are actually repetitions of short and long E's throughout this last stanza, but let's look at the long E's particularly, starting with between. Between the light and me, and then the windows failed, and then I could not see to see. So those four long E's kind of anchor the last three lines of this poem, and particularly the closing off that happens at the end, and I could not see to see, which is really the closing off of me, of the self. And all of this surrounds the final wonderful metaphor of the windows failing, presumably referring to the moment of death and externalizing the sense of failing. So the windows fail rather than the eyes. And that makes it happen that the narrator cannot see to see anymore. And you can think about what that final repetition does, the see to see, which obviously is the same word. But how is it different to say I could not see to see from saying I could not see? And it seems to continue this sense that the fly in the window, and there's this external world that is reflecting the internal life and the closing off of the internal life of the speaker of the poem. So again, there's much more you could do with this. It's an extraordinary poem. But that gives you an idea of how you can use these terms to animate a discussion of a poem like this. Before I sign off, there's just one more kind of repetition that I'd like to call your attention to, and it's called anaphora. And Dickinson doesn't use it, so I'm going to use a couple of other brief examples. Anaphora is the repetition of a word or words at the beginning of lines. And what you'll find if you start paying attention to anaphora is that a lot of the most famous and memorable pieces of rhetoric use anaphora often extensively. And there are many other related terms. So there's a term for the repetition of words at the end of lines, and of the beginning and end, and of when the beginning and end cross over to become the end and beginning. That's chiasmus. It's one of my favorite ones. But I'll just concentrate on anaphora for the moment because it is one that you'll see in the readings for tomorrow. So the two huge historical examples of anaphora are from Martin Luther King and Winston Churchill. In King's case, it's the I Have a Dream speech. And of course, I have a dream is itself the repeated phrase that's most remarkable there. And indeed, toward the end of the speech, King uses I have a dream in 8 consecutive small paragraphs. So he really builds up this rhythm of what the dream consists of and builds momentum and energy going into it. But even when he finishes that, he culminates it by evoking another anaphora. And this is how it goes. So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. So there's also all kinds of assonance and alliteration in that phrase. And you can hear that he's using two straight bouts of anaphora, the second one with an even tighter and faster rhythm than the first one. And that rhetorical effect is part of what makes that speech so memorable. Of course, the content is also extraordinary. But King said a lot of extraordinary things. He had a remarkable rhetorical voice. And one of the reasons why this one has stood out as the most remembered speech, I think, is that double anaphora at the end. So the other example is from Winston Churchill in the context of World War II. He gives a very famous speech of encouragement to England. And this is very, very well known in England itself, but also around the world. And this is what he says. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. So that's we shall, we shall, we shall, we shall, we shall. There are 9 we shalls in there, and almost all of them are also we shall fights. And it's like King's rhetoric in that this is something that has been built up to, and then it culminates in this rapid fire anaphora, just boom, 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 boom. And you can sense the fight of the words reflecting what he's evoking in the people. So that's another term that will be handy as you look at the readings for tomorrow, and we'll have fun applying those in our conversation.